A billionaire discovered a heartwarming secret: his son's unexpected bond with the black maid. In the lush suburbs of Atlanta, where the sun's rays danced across manicured lawns, Jack Matthews stood at the helm of his empire, a billionaire with power, prestige, and a gleaming estate that echoed with the emptiness of ambition. Amid sprawling hallways and lavish rooms adorned with art, his 16-year-old son, Luke, felt like a mere ghost. In Jack's world of wealth, love was measured in bank accounts, while Luke craved what the opulence around him could not provide: connection. Every evening, as Jack buried himself in business deals, Luke would find refuge in the kitchen, where Grace, their dedicated maid, brought warmth to the cold medallions of marble. Grace was more than a maid, she was a wellspring of wisdom, her smile bursting with a kindness that melted away the shroud of loneliness that cloaked Luke. He shared tales of his day at school life filled with privilege and pretentious peers, while Grace listened intently, offering stories of her own life. "Luke, you know, it's not the size of your house that makes you wealthy," she'd say, using her hands to emphasize the truth of her words. "It's the richness of your heart." Luke would nod, absorbing her every word like a sponge, feeling the warmth of hope filling the void he carried inside. But one day, when Jack caught a glimpse of Luke and Grace sharing a laugh, a storm brewed in him. "What's this nonsense?" he barked, his eyes narrowing. The love Luke felt began to crumble under the weight of his father's disapproval. Jack was determined to reignite his boy's passion for business, believing that only success mattered. "You're better than this," he would often say, each statement tightening the chains around Luke's spirit. Luke felt torn, a battle raging inside him as he wrestled with loyalty to his father and the burgeoning bond with Grace. Then came the day when the community faced a crisis. A recent storm had left many families struggling. Grace sprang into action, rallying neighbors, and creating a support network that spread hope like flowers blooming after the frost. Luke watched in awe as she organized, her strength revealing a stark contrast to Jack's aversion to anything outside the gates of their gilded estate. "Change starts with us," Grace urged, her eyes shining with a fierce determination. It was in that moment that Luke felt the embers of his convictions spark to life. Inspired by her selflessness, he resolved to stand up for those who needed a voice, the kind of action his father had dismissed as insignificant. "Before we continue, I need to let you know about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, hit that bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can drop a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen." Now let's continue. Time passed, and an event was set where Luke would finally break silence. As he stepped onto the stage, doubt tried to hold him back, but the memory of Grace's words propelled him forward. "We need to redefine success," he declared, his voice shaking but strong. "It's not about wealth or power, but about how we uplift each other." The crowd sparked with energy, murmurs of recognition ebbed and flowed. Lives intertwined, hearts beat together in that moment. Jack stood frozen, eyes widening as his son challenged everything he held dear. The weight of Luke's words hung thick in the air, demanding Jack to reflect on what kind of legacy he was truly leaving behind. As Luke stood there, fired up with newfound courage, he locked eyes with his father. The silence that stretched between them vibrated with tension. Would Jack embrace this change, or retreat behind walls of wealth? The question lingered, igniting anticipation for what was to come and leaving Luke standing firm in the storm. Luke's heart raced as he maintained eye contact with Jack. In that freezing silence, he could hear the echo of his own thoughts drowning in the clamor of the crowd. Faces swirled like a kaleidoscope before him, some confused, some inspired, and others judgmental. He felt the weight of their expectations pressing down, yet there was a flicker of hope lighting his insides. Jack's expression, a mixture of disbelief and anger, shifted slightly, and Luke could almost see the gears turning in his father's mind. He awaited the response that would shift the course of their lives, but when Jack finally spoke, his voice was cold and sharp. "You want to uplift people? You realize you're simply encouraging dependency? The hurt in Jack's voice was unmistakable. In that moment, Luke's heart sank. Was his father so lost in his world that he couldn't see the good in helping others? Dad, we can do more than just create wealth, Luke replied, trying to steady his voice just enough to be heard above the mounting murmurs around them. We can inspire change. People need hope, not just handouts. The words hung between them, filled with an urgency that felt like a drumbeat in Luke's chest. He glanced toward the crowd, seeing faces that mirrored his father's conflicted expression. He could sense Grace standing somewhere behind them, her presence a soft and constant reminder of the warmth he craved. He needed to defend not just his beliefs but also the bond they had nurtured. Are you willing to risk your future for this misguided notion? Jack snapped, his tone dripping with condescension. Do you want to associate with those beneath us? What legacy do you think you're building? Jack's words were loaded, each one aimed like a cannonball, but Luke stood resolute. Maybe it's time we rethink the kind of legacy that matters, Luke said, speaking from a place of deep conviction. It's not about how many zeros are in a bank account. It's about how many lives we can touch. The tension in the air crackled, and Luke glanced back to Grace, who nodded encouragingly from the sidelines. The briefest smile broke through the heaviness of worry on her face, and it gave Luke the strength he needed to push forward. Every single day, people like Grace show us what true wealth looks like. And I want to be a part of that, helping those in need. Is that such a crime? Jack's silence was deafening, a testament to the chasm between them. As the crowd began to murmur again, Luke could feel the seeds of respect planted among the listeners. We need to start questioning what kind of success we celebrate, he continued, more passionate, found strength radiating from him. Because it's not wealth that defines us. It's kindness and unity. Luke finished with a surge of emotion swelling inside, longing for his father to understand. But when he held his breath, hoping for a flicker of recognition from Jack, he saw nothing but the hard line of his father's jaw. The man who had once been his hero seemed a distant figure now, trapped in a fortress of power. In the rear of the crowd, Grace clapped slowly, deliberately. One by one, others joined in, their applause rising and filling the space like gentle waves crashing against rocks. Luke took it in, the uplifting wave of support chasing away his doubt, if only for a moment, but in the fragile buoyancy of that moment, Luke's heart remained troubled. This was just the beginning. He discerned that change wouldn't come easily, especially from his own father. As Luke stepped down from the stage, he felt free yet uncertain. He'd taken a stand, but would Jack ever see the light? And then, with every ounce of courage that was still in him, Luke turned back to find his father, searching for understanding in his eyes. Dad, he said, his voice wavering with hope yet drenched in apprehension, will you stand with me? What if Jack didn't see this the way he did? What if this marked the rift that could never be repaired? Would Luke be strong enough to face it? The question lingered heavily, unveiling what lay ahead. Luke's breath caught in his chest as he searched his father's face for a glimmer of understanding. Jack's expression remained unreadable, a storm cloud of frustration and disappointment resting just behind his eyes. The crowd continued to murmur, their curiosity buzzing like a hive of bees, but all Luke could focus on was the desperate need for connection. Dad, please, Luke urged, frustration gnawing at his patience. I'm not trying to undermine our family's legacy. I want to build something new with it. Something meaningful. He could feel Grace's encouraging gaze still on him, like a lifeline tethering him to a hopeful future, and he clung to that as a flicker of resolve ignited within him. Jack stepped back, leaving a widening chasm between them that felt heavier than before. Meaningful? He spat. You think playing savior to those people will fix anything? You have no idea what the real world is like. Power and wealth are what really matter. With each word, Luke felt as if his heart was being squeezed tighter, like a sponge draining away hope. The roar of protest in his mind was almost deafening. But at what cost, Dad? It was a question he never thought he'd have to ask his father, but here they were, on opposing sides of a wall built from years of ideology. The audience had become a silent witness to their disagreement, and Luke could feel their eyes shift from him to Jack. He knew this was bigger than just their battle, it was a reckoning for them both. Their family name hung in the air, muddied by the conflation of wealth and morality. He took a deep breath, steadied himself, and let out the words he'd been holding back. I can't be part of a legacy that ignores suffering. I refuse to be complacent. Jack's eyes narrowed, disbelief transforming into something more akin to disdain. The crowd stirred, an energy pulsing through the air, impatient for resolution but fearful of taking sides. Luke could sense the tension building, like a tightrope stretched over an abyss, and there was no turning back now. His voice rose, fueled by the mix of anger and determination he finally allowed himself to express. This isn't just about you or our family. This is about community. This is about being human. As the final words fell from his lips, the silence that followed struck like lightning, sharp and electric. Luke felt his pulse racing, adrenaline surging as he took a step closer. He had to break through to Jack, to reach the father who had always pushed him to aim for the stars, but now seemed lost in the clouds. You taught me that strength lies in helping others, Luke continued softly, the urgency in his voice masked by a haunting vulnerability. You always said responsibility comes with privilege. I don't want to be your son if that means turning a blind eye to those who need us. A flicker of emotion crossed Jack's face, an imperceptible shift that made Luke hold his breath. Could it be? Was there a chance for understanding, a crack in the fortress? But just as quickly, it vanished, like smoke in a breeze. I can't believe I raised a fool, Jack retorted, an edge of self-righteous indignation creeping back. You're naive, Luke. The world doesn't change by smiling down on people. It's about control, an empire built on strength. Luke's heart plummeted. In that moment, he realized how far apart they truly were. Still, the murmuring crowd sparked a new kind of resolve. He couldn't give up, not now. If that's what you believe, then I guess I'll have to build my own world. The crowd, sensing the climax of their clash, tensed as they awaited Jack's response. Would he retreat into his fortress or step into the light? As Jack's jaw tightened, Luke took one last look at the crowd, longing for a sliver of hope. Grace had stepped forward, her expression piercing through the chaos. All the judgment faded away, leaving only warmth and encouragement. Dad, Luke said finally, a tremor in his voice with a mix of desperation and defiance, what kind of father are you willing to be? The unasked question hung heavily in the air. Luke's future hinged on Jack's answer, the outcome still unknown as silence engulfed them all. The seconds felt like hours, stretched thin as Jack processed his son's words. Luke stood in the crowd's gaze, vulnerability naked in his plea. Every heartbeat echoed in his ears. He searched his father's face for the tiniest sign of recognition, some hint that he might understand. Then, the tension broke as Jack suddenly sighed, his stern facade flickering, like a candle threatened by the wind. You think you can just rewrite everything? Just like that? He gestured widely, frustration simmering beneath the surface. You don't understand what's at stake, Luke. But I do. Luke's voice quivered. If you just listen. Jack interrupted, his voice booming. You want me to listen to your dreams while the reality of our business slips away? The world is more complex than you think. You can't save everyone. Maybe not everyone, Luke shot back, his cadence firming, but I can start somewhere. I want to bring hope, Dad. I want to show that we can grow without stepping on the backs of the less fortunate. Each word burst from him like a dam set free, and he could see brief flashes of respect interspersed with doubt flicker across the crowd. The murmuring continued, growing louder now, reacting to the charged exchange. Luke felt buoyed by their energy, a fire igniting in him as he pressed on. Think about it, what kind of legacy do we actually want to leave behind? One that thrives on exploitation or one that lifts people up? Grace moved closer, her eyes shining as if she could channel the warmth of the sun itself. Luke could see her unwavering support for a moment, and it centered him. She believed in him, and he needed to believe in himself, too. Jack's expression shifted, and for the first time, he seemed to regard Luke not just as a son but as an equal, a man with ideals that challenged his own. A flicker of something softer ignited. Was it remorse, perhaps? The thought made Luke hold his breath. But the glimmer faded as quickly as it appeared. "I built this empire so you wouldn't have to struggle like I did," Jack said, his voice low, harder to penetrate than the previous outbursts. "I sacrificed everything for this family." Luke felt his resolve falter for a split second, the weight of his father's labor almost dragging him down. "And I appreciate that, but I don't want to perpetuate a cycle that hurts others. There's got to be another way." As Luke met his father's eyes again, he was searching for answers buried beneath Jack's hardened exterior. Could he ever truly change? Could he ever see things through Luke's lens? "If you truly believe in this path," Jack began cautiously, "what if it costs you everything?" "Then it costs me everything." Luke shot back, standing his ground. "But I'd rather chase something real and meaningful than live in this hollow facade. Our wealth means nothing if we can't share it." The crowd shifted, their collective breath hovering in the air. Jack's fists clenched at his sides, muscles taut as if he were wrestling with invisible forces. "What will it take, Luke?" he finally asked, weariness creeping into his voice, layered with frustration. "What will it take for you to understand the value of our name?" Luke took a tentative step forward, his heart racing. "To realize that our family can stand for something bigger. For change." To show kindness. Before he could finish, Grace's voice cut through the silence, filled with disbelief. "Doesn't it matter what your legacy truly represents? What kind of son would it take to make that change?" The air seemed to crackle around them, all eyes trained on Jack, who appeared torn, a storm brewing within him, competing with Luke's hopes. In that moment, Luke knew he had to press on. "You're a great man, Dad. I believe that. But it's time to take a stand. What do you want to fight for?" As the question hung heavy in the air, the silence vibrated with anticipation. The crowd swayed, waiting, but Jack's expression remained unreadable. Luke felt like he was standing on the edge of a cliff, heart racing, adrenaline pumping. Then, just as Jack opened his mouth, a loud crash echoed from behind. The crowd turned, startled. What had just disrupted their desperate moment of connection? The noise shattered the tension, sending ripples of confusion through the crowd. Luke spun around as a figure stumbled into the light, a young man, perhaps in his early 20s, trying to regain his balance after colliding with a stack of chairs. A mix of surprise, embarrassment, and urgency filled his eyes. "Sorry," he shouted, pushing his unruly curls off his forehead, breathing heavily. I didn't want to miss what was happening." The laughter that followed broke the tension momentarily, but Luke could see Jack's jaw tightening again, his patience wearing thin. There was something in that moment, though, raw and unguarded, as the crowd's smiles faded into a collective curiosity. "Who are you?" Jack called out, his voice still carrying an authority that silenced the murmurs. The young man's posture shifted. He straightened up, nerves briefly flickering behind his bravado, but there was a determination in his gaze. "I'm Ethan. I used to work at the community center downtown. I heard there was a meeting, and I couldn't just sit back anymore." He took a step closer, glancing at Luke before meeting Jack's eyes. "You've all got power, but what about us? What about people like me?" Jack's brow furrowed as if processing this unexpected shift, while Luke felt a spark of understanding ignite in his chest. This wasn't just about him and his father anymore. This was larger. "Ethan, listen," Jack responded, his tone a mix of disbelief and condescension, "you don't know what it takes to keep this business running. It's not just about what we can do for people. Ethan shook his head, determination giving strength to his voice. I know what it's like to struggle. I've seen my friends lose hope, lose jobs. I've watched my community suffer. But you have the chance to make a difference. Not just about the bottom line. The crowd started to murmur again, faces shifting, some nodding slowly. Luke could see the cogs turning in their minds, wondering, contemplating, challenging their ideas about wealth and responsibility. Together, we can show that it's possible to change things, Ethan continued, his passion infectious. You don't have to fight against the world, you can fight for it. If you really want to leave a legacy, make it one worth remembering. Luke felt the tide turning, energy crackling in the air as an unexpected wave of solidarity began to wash over them. He exchanged a brief glance with Grace, who stood beside him, her expression filled not just with surprise but hope. Jack's eyes flickered with something: hesitation, acknowledgement, or perhaps fear of what this challenge could mean. What do you suggest we do? He asked, his voice quieter this time, almost hesitant. Ethan took a deep breath, standing taller, buoyed by the moment. Start local. Listen to the voices in your neighborhood. Make changes that matter, he said, looking pointedly at Jack, then expanding his gaze to the crowd. You'll find that true wealth is about lifting each other up. Those words hung heavy in the air, reverberating through the thrumming hearts of everyone present. Luke's heart raced. They had begun to step into a new reality, one that transcended familial conflict and entered the realm of community, purpose, and unconditional support, but before Luke could respond, the atmosphere shifted once more. A figure emerged from the shadows at the back of the crowd, and the tension in the air thickened. An unmistakable presence, someone from Jack's past, whose arrival could change everything. Looks like I came at just the right moment, didn't I? The voice called out, cold and familiar. As the crowd turned, every eye fixated on the surprising figure, Luke felt dread creep in. What had they just unlocked? And would they be ready for what lay ahead? The murmurs reached a fever pitch as the figure stepped forward, emerging from the shadows. The crowd shifted, faces taut with curiosity and concern. Luke strained to see, his heart pounding in his chest. When he finally caught a glimpse, he felt a rush of emotions, confusion, anger, and an unexpected twinge of fear. Sarah, Jack's voice dripped with disbelief, almost a whisper. Luke recognized her instantly. The woman who was once part of his father's life. A ghost that lingered long after she was gone from their home. Her presence ripped open old wounds, memories of turbulent family dinners and harsh exchanges. Jack's face hardened, eyes flickering with a mix of resentment and regret. What are you doing here? He demanded, cutting through the charged atmosphere like a knife. Is this how you welcome someone who has come to speak the truth? Sarah replied, her voice steady but laced with an edge. You think this is just business, Jack? You've forgotten the human side of all this. And I'm here to remind you of it. Ethan stared at Sarah, wide-eyed. He seemed torn between admiration and caution. The crowd mirrored his uncertainty, glancing between Jack and Sarah, feeling the tension that simmered just beneath the surface. Let her speak, Luke said, surprising even himself. There was a stab of hope mixed with fear. Maybe Sarah could shift things, pull Jack out of the shadows of his own making. We need to hear what she has to say. Jack bristled, but the weight of Luke's statement hung heavy in the air. After a moment's pause, he stepped back, permitting Sarah the space to articulate her thoughts. Thank you, Luke, she said, her gaze softening. You may not understand my history with Jack, but I have spent years witnessing the struggles of families like Ethan's. People you ignore when it comes to profits. It's not that they don't matter, it's that you choose not to see them. The community isn't some faceless entity, it's made up of individuals, each contributing their own story. Ethan, emboldened by her words, stepped forward. This is what I've been trying to say. There's a way to invest in people, to uplift them. To form partnerships instead of profits. Isn't that what this meeting is about? The crowd began to murmur again, voices overlapping, filled with tentative curiosity and dawning understanding. Jack stood rigid, the muscles in his jaw clenching. Luke could sense the internal battle waging within his father, the fear of change versus the flicker of something like a buried conscience awakening. "Sarah," Jack said slowly, almost reluctantly, "what do you want from me?" The answer hung suspended in the air. Luke held his breath, waiting. Would Sarah push Jack into a corner, or would she extend an olive branch? "I want you to take responsibility for the legacy you're building," Sarah replied softly, her tone far from accusatory. "Each choice you make affects not just your business but the community that depends on it. Those people standing here tonight, they matter. Their dreams matter. If you can't see that, you're losing your humanity." Every heart in the room felt pressured under the weight of her words, not just Jack's but everyone in that circle. They stood at a crossroads, a fragile moment that could shift into hope or despair, depending on the next word spoken. This is complicated," Jack finally stammered, glancing towards Luke, as if searching for an ally. In that moment, Luke sensed a possibility within the chaos. "Then let us simplify it. Let us start by finding common ground." His eyes flicked toward Ethan. "We need to figure out ways to work together." But just as he felt the momentum shifting, a loud crash echoed from behind the crowd, drawing gasps from the onlookers. All heads turned, a new sense of alarm rising. What now? Luke thought, dread creeping back in. Can this fragile thread of change withstand even more chaos? Luke's heart raced as he turned to catch sight of what had disturbed the tense atmosphere. The shouts of the crowd grew frantic, a ripple of anxiety spreading like wildfire. He strained against the mass of bodies, his eyes darting around until they landed on a broken display case at the edge of the gathering, shards of glass glinting under the dim lights. A commotion erupted as two men shoved their way through, clearly agitated. "What is going on?" Jack barked, his commanding tone cutting through the rising panic. It was his world of business and order that was at stake, after all. "Something's happening in the back, sir," one of the men shouted, his face flushed with urgency. "Some protesters showed up, demanding to see you. They're causing a scene, and someone broke the glass." Ethan looked pale, glancing nervously at Jack and then back at Sarah. "What do we do?" he whispered, an edge of fear in his voice. Sarah took a step closer to Ethan, placing a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "It's okay," she said, though her own certainty was wavering. "This is exactly what we were talking about. We have to face the truth together." Luke felt an odd mix of fear and excitement. Could this be a pivotal moment? Just as he thought it, a voice shouted from outside the building, powerful and resonant. "Jack! Do you care at all about the people you're hurting?" The crowd gasped, a collective intake of breath. Luke's eyes widened as he recognized the voice. It belonged to Maria, the woman who had worked for his family years ago, a woman who had fought for the rights of others, but had been silenced in the past. He knew she had left the area because of what Jack had done. And now, here she was, standing outside, ready to confront Jack once more. "Maria," Luke breathed under his breath, a wave of memories crashing over him. He recalled the stories she used to tell as she tucked him into bed, tales filled with perseverance and courage. How had she found the strength to return? "Let her through," Sarah urged, surprising everyone, including herself. "We need to hear her story too." Jack's eyes were wide with shock, a mixture of anger and fear twisting his features. "No. This isn't the place for this." But it felt like the very walls of the venue were shaking with emotion. Luke's head swam with possibilities. If Maria could remind everyone of the sacrifices made, the struggles endured, and the ways they could rise together, perhaps they could finally awaken the humanity that Jack had buried beneath layers of ambition. "Luke, stay back," Jack warned, taking a step forward, his power threatened. You don't understand what's at stake here. But Luke couldn't step back, not this time. I do understand, Dad. Don't you see? The stakes are higher than we think. If we don't listen now, nothing will change. The crowd shifted, a palpable tension in the air as they awaited Jack's next move. Would he bolt, intimidation winning once more? Would he close the door to redemption? As Luke's heart beat rapidly, he felt a spark of hope mix with the mounting dread. He felt his role becoming clearer, each choice unwrapping fear and revealing potential. But then, another shattering sound echoed from the crowd, this one louder, more intense. Someone had fallen. Brace yourself, Luke, he thought, the weight of the moment pressing down on him. Can we truly break through the past, or will we all fall together? He took a step forward, facing his father, his voice ringing out over the chaos. It's time to change everything. No more running. And as those words hung in the air, he wondered, was he stepping into courage or courting disaster? The crowd held its breath, a fragile tension stretching thin, waiting for something to snap. Luke's words echoed off the walls, bouncing back into the silence like a challenge. Jack's face twisted with fury and confusion. There was a moment, a fleeting moment, where all eyes turned toward him, searching for a response, and then, chaos erupted again. A woman's scream split the air, a sharp cry that pierced through the turmoil. Luke whipped his head around as another figure surged through the crowd. It was a young girl, maybe 12, tears streaming down her face as she desperately pushed her way toward the front. "Mom! Help!" she cried, calling for Maria. The fear in her voice injected a new level of urgency into the chaos. Maria pushed through the crowd, her eyes locking onto the girl. "Maya!" The recognition exploded like fireworks between them. Luke felt the weight of the moment shift as people parted to let Maria through. It was as if the future hinged on this reunion, two generations, separated by conflict, now on the same path. Ignoring the shattered glass and the irate faces around, Maria knelt down, arms wide open. "Come here, sweetheart." The girl dashed into her embrace, sobs racking her small frame. Their reunion held a raw intensity that pulled at the heartstrings of everyone watching. Luke glanced at Jack. The anger was still written across his father's face, but beneath that bluster, uncertainty flickered in his eyes. They were family, yet divided, a mirror image of the crowd that surrounded them. "Let us listen to her," Luke urged, heart pounding in his chest. "She has something to say, something we all need to hear." He took a step toward Jack, who seemed frozen, grappling with this unexpected scene unfolding before him. Was it anger? Shame? Something he could no longer ignore? "My mother, she lost her job because of what you did. We had to leave," Maya exclaimed, pointing an accusing finger at Jack. "Do you even know what it was like for us?" A murmur rippled through the crowd, the weight of her words sinking in. The voices of the protesters began to rise. "We want justice. We want to be heard." Luke could sense the tide shifting, like the wind changing direction suddenly. There was a growing empathy blossoming among the spectators, one that hadn't been there just moments before. "Please," Maria's voice trembled, wrapping around the crowd. "What happened wasn't just business, it was our lives. You can choose to be better." Her gaze swept across the crowd, pulling in the lost souls, igniting hope in their despair. Jack rubbed his temples, clearly torn. The very foundation of his empire began to feel more like a prison. Luke could see the man he knew and the man he had become struggling within him. "Dad," he pressed, "if you keep running, nothing will get better. Don't you see? We have a chance to change this." "It's not that simple," Jack snapped, his voice cracking. "I built this from nothing on the backs of people you hurt," Sarah interjected softly but firmly. "It's time to stop justifying your actions. Don't let pride hold you back." An uncomfortable silence took over as Jack's eyes flitted from the protesters, to the crowd, and finally to Luke. "What do you want from me?" Jack's voice was quieter now, more vulnerable. The crowd leaned in closer, anticipation hanging in the air. "We want you to listen," Luke replied, feeling an electric pulse of uncertainty. Could they actually make a difference today? As they stood together, he sensed that history was shifting. Would Jack take the plunge into the unknown? Then, familiar voices echoed from somewhere behind the crowd. "You're going to let all this happen again?" Luke's heart sank. The past wasn't done with them yet. The crowd shifted uneasily, whispers and gasps swirling like clouds of tension. Luke's stomach knotted at the sound of those familiar voices. They were the ones who had continued to fuel the flames of resentment for too long. Shadows moved near the edges of the group, two figures, their eyes filled with disdain, creeping closer through the throngs of humanity, determined to reclaim the narrative. "Get away from her, Maya. You don't belong with these people," one of them shouted. It was Thomas, a longtime associate of Jack's, who had never been shy about expressing his superiority complex. He sneered, his face twisted in a mix of contempt and anger as he pointed at Maya, aiming to reassert control over the situation. Maria shielded her daughter, her body instinctively positioning itself between Maya and Thomas. "Leave her alone," she cried, fury rising to the surface. The crowd shifted again, caught between the urgent need for peace and the clashing anger erupting from the sidelines. "Stop!" Luke implored, stepping forward, his feet leading him into the spotlight. The visibility and pressure intensified as more faces turned to him, waiting for his words to carry the weight of wisdom. "This isn't about you, Thomas. Or anyone else for that matter. This is about us." Jack's brows furrowed deeper. For a moment, Luke saw a flicker of recognition pass through his father's eyes, as if trapped memories were fighting to break free from his carefully constructed walls. The air was thick with anticipation. It felt as though the crowd was holding its breath, waiting for anything to shift. "Remember, it's about healing," Luke continued, his voice steadying. "If we're going to move forward, we have to address the past." He looked directly at his father, his heart pounding fervently. "All of it." The crowd whispered among themselves, the tension thick as molasses. Luke glanced back at Maya and Maria. Their fear had transformed into a fierce resolve, something pure in its vulnerability. He turned back to face the onlookers fortified by their resolve. "Let us not do this again. Not like before. Bringing back the old rivalries will only hurt us more." Thomas laughed derisively, but his bravado felt misplaced. He continued to push against the crowd, but fewer people seemed to listen to him. Luke felt a flicker of hope surge within him. Perhaps there was a way to overcome this. "We are more than what divides us," he added, returning his gaze to the people who had suffered losses because of Jack's decisions. "And if we listen, truly listen, we can begin to rebuild," Sarah urged, her tone low yet firm, each word carrying a weight that needed to be felt. "And what is stopping us?" Maya implored, her tear-stained face filled with fierce determination. "If we could find a way to talk, to understand each other, we could change everything." At this, Jack's shoulders sagged, the defenses he had carried for years appearing to soften. Everything he had fought so hard to maintain seemed to crumble around him. The creases on his forehead deepened, his inner turmoil palpable to those watching. Luke knew this was the moment they had all been waiting for, the space where hope dared to peek through the clouds of uncertainty, but in the midst of this potential breakthrough, a sharp voice cut through the air. "You really think he'll change? You've got it all wrong." Another figure emerged from the shadows, an older man in a tailored suit, who stepped forward confidently. Jack's expression darkened at the sight, the familiar scorn reflected in his eyes like a mirror. "You're going to let this happen?" The man challenged, locking eyes with Jack. "You'd throw away the life you built for some pathetic crying girl?" Everything felt poised for an explosion, a cycle of anger threatening to resume. Luke felt the gravity of the moment, an undeniable tension hanging in the air. Would Jack stand up for what was right or retreat back into the safety of silence? A murmur echoed from the crowd as they huddled closer, the pressure mounting, their hearts pounding in anticipation. What would Jack decide? In the midst of the turmoil, Jack Matthews stood at a crossroads, a beacon of power now flickering with uncertainty. The faces around him buzzed with expectation, hope mingling with fear. Luke, fueled by the powerful connection shared between them, felt the weight of his father's struggle. "Dad," Luke whispered, heart pounding, "this is the moment. You have the chance to change everything." The roar of the crowd, the toppling walls of the past, all seemed to hinge on Jack's response. With the echoes of the past beckoning from the edges, Jack looked at Luke, the boy he had pushed and molded into his own image. But everything was shifting. The connections Luke had forged with Grace, the kinship with the community, and even Ethan's passionate plea carved space for understanding in Jack's heart. "Do you really believe this can be different?" Jack's voice was rough, like gravel, and his eyes reflected a tempest of emotions. "Yes. If you see the value in community, in listening to those we once disregarded." Luke's voice steadied, gaining strength from the heartwarming scene of Maria hugging her daughter against the barrage of doubt. "You once told me, strength comes from lifting others up. This is your chance to do that." The older man in the tailored suit retorted, disdain dripping from his words. "You're weak if you let these people sway you, Jack. Do you really want to throw away the empire you've built for their fleeting emotions?" But something snapped in Jack. The memory of countless nights spent ensuring his family's comfort flickered before him, hollow and empty against the reality of lives intertwined in a fragile community, each soul holding stories of struggle. "Enough," he finally said, his voice gaining ground. "I've spent too long ignoring what truly matters." A hush fell over the assembly. People leaned forward, disbelief hanging thick in the air. Jack looked at Luke, his son whose heart beat with a hope that resonated deeply. There, amid the faces of the wounded and the determined, Jack began to take down the walls he built, one brick at a time. "Change begins with acknowledging our faults." His voice trembled slightly, the weight of his admission palpable. "I have been blind to the hurt I've caused. And I see it now. I want to help, but I need your guidance. I need to know how to do it right." The words rolled off his tongue, raw and unfamiliar, like untrodden ground springing to life. Cheers erupted from the crowd, a swell of hope surged through them like a tidal wave. Maya clutched her mother, eyes shining with disbelief and wonder. This wasn't the ending anyone had expected, yet it held promise. "Finally, we can work together," Maria exclaimed, her face lighting up with newfound belief. "We can find ways to connect, to uplift each other." Surrounding voices chimed in agreement, excited murmurs weaving through the crowd like a vibrant tapestry. Ethan spoke up, emboldened by the turn of events. "Jack, if we start by addressing the needs of our community, creating jobs, opportunities for education, we can make a real difference. Your resources can build a bridge instead of a barrier." Tears pooled in Jack's eyes as he looked around at the faces that had once felt so distant. The truth had settled deep within him. He had missed the essence of what it meant to connect, to thrive together. He took a deep breath, exhaling the weight of the past that had lingered far too long. "Let us create programs. Let us listen to those who are directly affected. And let us build the kind of legacy that will inspire future generations to do better." The words resonated, breathing life into the room, filling the space with a new resolve. As Jack reached toward Luke, the moment hung suspended, charged with energy. "Thank you for showing me the way, son." It was an invitation, an open hand, ready to embrace the future together. Luke couldn't contain the flood of emotions. He stepped closer, their arms finally meeting in a strong embrace that resonated with warmth. The crowd erupted with applause, each clap a heartbeat, a shared joy in the transformation taking place. The realization swept over Luke: this was just his victory, it was shared among all those present. Together, they had cracked open a door, and through it glimmered a path that everyone could tread. Jack stepped back, the veil of hesitation lifting, and turned to face those he had long disregarded, an unexpected kindness reflecting in his gaze. "Let us get to work," he proclaimed, enthusiasm spilling from him like sunlight breaking through clouds. In that moment, a wave of change washed over the crowd, a collective aspiration weaving through their hearts. They were prepared to move forward, not just as individuals but as a community united in purpose. As the chaos subsided into a comfortable murmur, Grace stood at the front, a radiant smile lighting her face. Luke caught her eye, and in shared recognition, they held tight to that bond formed in compassion. Yes, it took a storm to reveal the heartwarming secret. True success is found not in wealth or power but in the connections we build and the love we share. With their hearts brimming with hope and gratitude, Luke turned back to the crowd, ready for the future that awaited. And as the sun set over Atlanta, uniting all beneath its glow, the true journey had just begun. Now is the moment to show your support. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and urge more people to discover these transformations. Comment your reactions and feelings about the ending. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this transformation. You need to subscribe now, and don't wait not even one more second to share. Only true fans understand the importance of supporting the channel through these actions.